If you're enjoying the Heath Geeks Book Club podcast, we'd appreciate if you hit the subscribe button, leave a like, rating, or review, whichever your preferred podcatcher platform allows.
This episode is sponsored by Well Balanced Nutrition and 360 Health.
Welcome to the Heath Geeks Book Club podcast. Listen in as Kristen Norton and Eleanor Russell review all those great health and wellness books you've been wanting to read or you have read and want to talk about. Here's Kristen and Eleanor.
Hello, everybody. We're talking to you from Such and Such Media with Tim, our producer.
Hi.
And Kristen, one of our health geeks.
Hello.
And me, Eleanor, another health geek. And we started talking about a book called The Body, A Guide for Occupants by Bill Bryson in our last episode. And we want to continue that. I think one of the things I wanted to also say about him or this book is there are many places where he says, nobody knows why, or we still don't understand that. So there's a lot of mystery still in this magical body that we inhabit.
Right, and he writes this as sort of a tribute to the way that things inside you just work without us telling them to, and how our body is just made up of these elements that by themselves are just elements, but somehow they come together and work in this miraculous way.
Yeah, and didn't he say something about one of his science teachers said you know, to build your body it costs about $5.60. And then he actually said, no, that's not right. It's more like $1,000 because some of the elements in here are very rare. You know, but I thought that was you were talking about the body is just this mess of molecules. But
No, he starts that with the cost of building a human is 96,546 pounds.
I don't know what that translates to.
Yeah, I don't either. But a Nova PBS show estimated it to be $168.
Oh, okay.
To build a human.
Okay.
It costs for all the elements.
Yeah, because I have been in classrooms where they said, you know, it costs you about $4 to build a human. And so he says, no, not true.
Not true.
He went to the work to figure that out. That's what I'm saying. This guy hears something. He says, oh, that doesn't seem reasonable. Let me check that out. And then he goes and does extensive research.
It's wild.
It's fun.
As one does.
It makes for good reading.
Yeah, a lot of good reading. So let's break it down to maybe some of our favorite things that he talks about as we go through the body. What does he start with? Chapter 1 is the skin or the brain?
I think the skin comes. Let's see. Well, it is. He calls it after how to build a human. Then he calls the outside skin and hair.
Okay, that's where he talks about the trillions and trillions of microbes.
Yeah.
That was fun. We have 40,000 different species of microbes, 900 of which live in your nostrils alone. So he gives you these little blurbs that just kind of help put things into perspective about how amazing things are. So over 1 million microbes have been identified, and only 1,415 are known to harm us. So that's a pretty good ratio, he says.
Yeah, and I wanted to read a thing that he talks about the kiss. Did you read that? Yeah. I'm not sure you read it, but it makes for good, since you're talking about microbes.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, see what y'all think about this. Microbes are ferocious housekeepers, it seems. Have sex and you and your partner will exchange a lot of microbes and other organic material. Passionate kissing alone, according to one study, results in the transfer of up to 1 billion bacteria from one mouth to another, along with about 0.7 milligrams of protein, 0.45 milligrams of salt, 0.7 micrograms of fat, 0.2 micrograms of miscellaneous organic compounds, that is, bits of food. But as soon as the party is over, the host microorganisms in both parties will begin a kind of giant sweeping out process, and with only a day or so, the microbial profile for both parties will be more or less fully restored to what it was before they locked tongues. Occasionally, some pathogens sneak through, and that is when you get herpes or a head cold, but that's the exception. So
that takes the sexiness right out of it.
Yeah, but that's the kind
Come
of
here and give me microbes.
yeah,
baby.
yeah, baby. those are the kind of word pictures that he does in here, though, and you can't
Yeah.
stop reading that. I mean, it's like, what is he doing? I mean, who cares about millimicrograms of protein or salt?
He's
Like you
kind
said.
of like the class clown sitting in your science class, like
I
telling
don't
jokes
know.
about this stuff.
Yeah. So I thought y'all would enjoy that, just in case.
Well, I wrote this note because, of course, as a dietitian, I'm like, yeah, this is super cool. So the bacteria in our gut produce 10,000 digestive enzymes. So those are the things that help us break down our food. Where our bodies, because the bacteria is not us, so we only produce 20.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's remarkable that it's taken so many centuries for us to pay attention to this.
Right.
You know, it's a hot topic right now, and people are experimenting with it because there's no consensus really about, do you supplement probiotics or not? And we read some books where they talk about the formation of your immune system and what you're exposed to in your early years can maybe set you up. And, we read the book about the end of food allergy, and, microbes are playing a part in that too. So it's an interesting world.
Right. And we're focusing on the gut microbiota, but there's some books that we should read, right? Because they're all over our skin, right? He says they're in our nostrils, and they're all different. Mm-hmm. It's not the same little community of microbes in each of those areas.
Plenty of work for the rest of the generations to
That's
come.
right. Oh, he says viruses live in us, too. The average person has 174 of them.
Yeah, there was some discussion somewhere along the line when we were talking about RNA vaccinations and RNA being embedded in the human genome from that vaccine. And one of the discussions was, well, evolutionarily, viral DNA has already been injected into our human DNA, and it's allowed for the implantation of an embryo in making a placenta, which allows for internal development of fetuses, which makes mammals different. So it was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. But so our DNA's got a lot of stuff that's already been inserted in it, and it comes from different sources. So to me, it's not unreasonable to think that we have viruses living with us.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Well, DNA, so he says there's enough of me or you to stretch to Pluto if you took all your DNA and stretched it into a human strand.
Yeah.
To Pluto.
Another word picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see that, can't you?
Yeah. It's fun.
Well, on this microbes thing, he talks about the microbiota is a body organ. And when I was teaching anatomy and we did systems, there was not a system of microbes in the anatomy book, or in the physiology book. And so that's kind of what they're saying is maybe there's a whole new chapter in these textbooks that people are studying
Right.
to come. I like that. I also wanted to write one on the diffuse adipose system, but that's not anything we need to talk about here. Okay, another thing, since this guy is European and I come from America,
Mark.
we have, an academic system here that I'm familiar with, and this Royal Society that we were just talking. Did you say he had some credentials after his name?
Yeah, if you Wikipedia him, he has OBE, which is Officer of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire.
Yeah.
After his name, and then he has this other HONFRS, which is apparently an award granted by the Fellows of the Royal Society of London to individuals who have made a substantial contribution to natural knowledge like math, engineering, and science.
And so here you have a guy that didn't make it through the American university system, who has been awarded these remarkable credentials and has been a prolific author.
And has been able to dive into these deep subjects.
Yeah. So it's sort of like he designed his own education.
It's pretty cool, yeah.
And so he's one of these exceptional people.
Absolutely.
And there are other examples, right, Tim, of people who've done that?
Yes, Bill
Designed it,
Gates.
yeah,
Bill Gates
right.
was one.
Yeah. And Steve Jobs, did he do it? Did he finish?
Steve Jobs?
Yeah.
I think he finished.
Did he? Oh, I thought some of those decided not to. Well, anyhow.
Probably Wozniak, the guy that was with Steve, whoever Wozniak was.
Who was the Facebook?
Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
He didn't graduate.
Yeah, I don't think he ever had time. He
He's
was
busy taking
Yeah.
off with Facebook.
Yeah, so, a lot of times people look at young folks in their their journey and say, you have to amount to something, you have to go do these things. And amongst us are some really intriguing people who need to strike out on their own and do their own thing. We should make sure they get to do that.
Maybe we should all backpack in Europe.
I think a gap year is a good idea. Y'all ready to go? Let's go.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, so there's this place called the Wellcome Sanger Institute in England. And so over here we have Duke University. We've got all these other research centers, that we talk about. But they also have them over there. So in this book, Bryson refers to a lot of the British or English establishment that was kind of good for me to learn about, because I always think of looking at our scientific reports from the American body of information.
You still had a good amount from here, too.
Yes, he did. But I'm saying he in this book, he makes sure to clarify where his ideas are coming from.
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting. So I learned a word, and I should have known this word. Do you all know what horripilation means?
What'd you call me?
Horripilation. You're a goosebump.
That's an insult.
A goosebump.
That's the word for goosebump. So the other thing this man, Bill Bryson, has is a love of words. And he brings them in and tells you where they came from and how we came up with these words to describe the human body.
I think he has a book about words, too.
I might have to read that one because I like words. And I have a good friend that we talk about words a lot, so she might enjoy that one, too. So that was a new word for me. And then when he writes, he says things like the brain is unnerving.
Oh, he was most fascinated by the brain.
Yeah.
Oh, but the little pun there.
but there he chooses a word
Unnerving.
that's related to the brain to talk about it being amazing. It's unnerving. Because the brain is all nerves. It's nerved. It's not unnerved.
Yeah, well, in all the interviews I watched of him, that's what he was most fascinated by, the brain, how it's mostly water,
Fat
and protein.
Mm-hmm.
It's a mushy little thing up there,
Little
and yet
soft
it
jello.
interprets our entire world, and how we don't really it interprets the world, but we're not really getting the literal world.
Oh, yeah,
us,
yeah. He does
right?
talk about how the eyes filter and only present stuff and maybe ahead of time or what. It gets really complicated.
Like a fifth of a second ahead of time, we can see into the future, something crazy
Something like that, yeah.
It starts to predict.
Yeah, and
things for us.
anticipate what
Yes.
we need to know. And the blind spot in the eye, it's always anticipating that. And he has some nice illustrations in here of some of those optical illusions where you say they're two triangles and they really aren't. And we're all kind of familiar with those mind trick things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I say it's kind of difficult in a
The
court.
blue dress or the white dress.
Exactly. That was floating around on the internet a while ago. And people would see it differently. And you talk about in the court systems when people are relating what they saw. I saw this wreck from this perspective
Yeah.
with my context of what my day was. And here's what I'm telling you happened. And the person next to him says, this is what happened. And my sister and I have different recollections of our family experiences. And I've heard other people say the same thing. It's like we don't remember it the same way because we didn't see it the same way. And the mind put that all into our context of understanding. Or the brain, excuse me.
I think that's a fascinating topic, and I feel like I've come across a book that goes into how our mind works in that way and how we can't necessarily rely on our memory and just the things to know about your brain. So that might be another book on our list.
I
if
think
put it there.
so. Well, actually, I was going to say he wrote the body. I wonder if he's going to write the mind and then the soul. He's got a series.
He seems to not be able to stop writing.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I had an idea about another word thing that he threw up there. We were talking about microbes, right? Mm-hmm. And so in his little footnote, he goes to big deal to tell us about the difference between infectious and contagious. He goes, people use those words improperly.
Oh.
And so infectious means it's a microbe that shares the infection, and contagious means the way it's transmitted. So...
To me, I mean,
The rate of transmission.
Contagious means able to get it. The way I look at it. And what was the other one?
Infectious.
Infectious.
It's an infectious organism.
Once
it can infect.
Once it gets there, it will.
Yeah, that's what he's saying. The organism can infect you, And the contagion is whether or not you can transmit it. If you through the air or the cough or the touch or whatever. And there's so much variability in the way these microbes do that. Who can get it, who can't.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to hop to a different topic.
All right.
Hormones.
Oh, no, we can't go there yet.
Why
No.
not?
Because I want to talk about some other things. Okay. We can talk about things later. What about hormones?
Well, I thought there were just two really
There's a joke
cool
about that,
There's two
Don't
really
pay
cool
her.
stories in
I didn't
that.
say that.
So we talk about how he does some history telling, right? And so I liked just how he brings to everybody knows diabetes, right? And just brings to light that at one time diabetes was a death sentence before insulin was discovered. And he has a quote where someone said that that's one of the most resurrecting times that science has ever had, right? Because bringing people back to life with just the act of giving them insulin. The other fun story he has in there is the tallest person who has ever lived, Robert Wadlow. He was over 8 feet tall and died at age 22 because of sepsis that he got from these braces that they made him wear because he was so tall. And he was 8 feet 11 inches at the time of his death, and he had too much growth hormone that just wouldn't stop. So I had to share those fascinating things. Do you have any notes on the hormone chapter? No. Okay.
I might find them. Yeah, do you call adrenaline
Yeah.
There's this guy named Walter Cannon who, he's talked about over here. Anyway, this guy decided that he could talk lots of people into doing a very disgusting thing. So he talked his graduate students into overcoming their gag reflex and throwing a tube down there.
Oh, yes. That was an interesting one.
Yeah, and he came up with this is not the hormone thing, but he also, I'll finish that statement. And then he put a balloon on that tube, and then the kid would walk around all day, and they would measure the contractions of the stomach. But it ended up that he figured out the peristalsis of, the way we move food from the mouth to the gut. But one of the other things that he did was adrenaline, which is a hormone, and he coined the term fight or flight. Because we all use that term.
We do,
but
yeah.
Historically, you don't think about who was the first one to say that. And Bill Bryson says, I wonder who said that first, and goes and finds out. And
He does that
discovers this
throughout the book,
amazing,
yeah.
this amazing scientist that upon whose shoulders we stand. That's something that scientists usually say is the knowledge that we put forward comes because of the knowledge before us.
Right.
Addison was another fellow that worked with the hormone stuff.
Addison's disease.
Yeah, adrenal dysfunction. Brown Sequard ground up testes and ate them and felt pretty spry. And so that's just kind of the discovery of testosterone.
People did crazy things to learn about the body. That is one thing I learned from this book. Crazy things. And that's how we know so much, because people were willing to do, and some inhumane, is that how you say it? Stuff, because with the prisoners and
War.
Yeah,
this is creepy.
Yeah. But some people were willing to do it on their own, which is just...
Yeah, there's one guy that threw a catheter up his own arm into his heart to see if he could figure out if it was working. Okay. I'm sitting here in my lab, and nobody's ever done this. I think I'll run this thing up my vein.
Ugh. And then there were the brain surgeries.
Oh, lobotomies.
Gosh. Where they
We're getting ahead of ourselves.
Only be
we'll be
under
finished with this in one episode.
local anesthetics, and they were doing brain surgery.
Yeah.
I am thankful to live in this day and age. All right, well.
I want to go back to the skin, because that's where we started.
Yeah, sorry, my notes are random. I'm hopping all around. I'm driving Eleanor crazy right now.
And I'm hoping our listeners, but in a way, the book kind of jumps around that way too.
Yeah, a little bit.
So anyway, back on the skin, though, have you ever thought about your fingerprints? Of course you have. We've all, we got fingerprints. We know that if you do something against the law, they might take you in and fingerprint you, right? And then we use that in criminal case studies. Mm-hmm. That's not been done that long. And it turns out that Charles Darwin's cousin, Darwin was the father of evolution, decided that fingerprints could be used to catch criminals. But it took another 100 years before we actually did anything about it. But before him, the Chinese knew we had fingerprints because when they were throwing pots, clay pots, they would sign them with their fingerprint. And I thought that was pretty cool. It's like we're aware of things for a long time, but then there's the time that idea is ripe for someone to pick and make sense of.
Yeah.
And I've always been fascinated with that because what is a thought? We don't know what a thought is. They're all out there. There are fun books written about, thoughts. And then somebody grabs one. And why didn't I grab it? You grabbed it. I could have thought of that. But I didn't. You did. It's amazing. And that's what this is a history of, is the people that say, dong, there it is. I see it.
Right. And
I'm going to use it and report it. Back on the microbes that you were talking about, there was the Mr. Petrie, who was a graduate student, who decided to make a glassware to grow his microbes.
I would say he's the dish guy.
He's the dish guy, the Petri dish. And so if you want to know about Mr. Petrie, you should read this book, The Body by Bill Bryson.
Who are you?
Who am I?
You, yeah.
Oh, man. That's a good question. I'm a child of the universe, but I am a wellness architect, helping people build healthier lifestyles and taking care of their precious bodies so that they will allow them to reach their dreams. I would like you to check out my website, 360health4u.com.
And I am Kristen Norton, one of the 3 registered dietitians with Well Balanced Nutrition, where we provide nutrition and wellness coaching to help you have a healthy relationship with food and feel energized, confident, and have clarity around what to eat. Visit us at wellbalancednutrition.com, where you can apply for a free clarity coaching call. Thanks for listening, y'all.
Bye.
And opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and are not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted, and no part can be reproduced without the express written consent of Kristen and Eleanor.